Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. Today we're going to start continuing on our series of Global War 1936 to 1945 expansion sets. This one here, Elite Fighter Squadrons, this is actually pretty neat, this one. We played a game last weekend. I had a couple guys come to town from another province in Canada, and we had a good time. And we threw these ones in, but we didn't start. We didn't start the game with them, but we decided on the second day. It was, I think, 1939 when we were starting the second day. But we decided let's just throw them in. We didn't quite do it the way the rules tell you to do it, though. Like, they give you a whole set of rules and everything with them. What we did was we just threw them all on the board. Each side, there's 3 sides to the war. Each side just got 3 of them, and they got to place them anywhere in their home country. So that's what we did, but I'm going to go through the rules to tell you how they suggest that you do it, and then you can make your own decision as to what you want to do. So let's get started. Before we do, let's just take a look at what we have here. So these 5 down here, there's 5 for each side. So there's 5 for the Axis there, and there's 5 for the Allies. So let's just move this back so you can see that a little bit better. So there's 5 for the Allies, and there's 5 for the Comintern. And you notice there's a blue one there, right? That's a French one, but we'll get into that. So let's just start off with the Axis planes, shall we? Okay, so the first one there, that's this one right here. That's it looks like the regular fighter, and you get these fighters. The colors are slightly different than what you'd be used to because I've painted mine, okay? But yours will come in the colors that you're accustomed to. Actually, I don't think I've painted all of these. Like, the Japanese one's not painted, but you'll notice that, like, the American green and the Russian maroon is not the same as the out-of-box color, but yours will come in the out-of-box colors. And also, you don't get the flight stands. Those come from my friend War Torn in Toronto. Anyway, so let's get started. Also, you get all the roundels, and what you do is you just put it on top of the roundel, right? And so you'll know, you'll be able to differentiate this fighter from all the other fighters on the board that you have that are German. So the first one's a German fighter. It's a, hang on a second, I have it right here. It's a BF-109 anyway, I know that. Now, I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'm just going to show it to you here. Take a look at this. That first one there. GW-36. And take a look at the next one too. I don't know how to pronounce that one, so let's move on from that, shall we? Okay, the first one there. It's a fighter. Now, this represents the German 52nd Fighter Wing. It was the most successful fighter wing in World War II. The JG-52 participated in the Battle of France, Battle of Britain, Operation Barbarossa, Stalingrad, Kursk, and many other operations, claiming more than 10,000 air kills. Holy crap, they shot down over 10,000 planes. This fighter squadron right here, this first one. So they were really successful. And it only used the BF-109, so they didn't use any other type of fighter for them. So what you're going to do with that fighter there, hang on a second here we go. What you're going to do with that one is place beneath any German fighter. That fighter gains +1 attacking defense. Before I get to that, though, let's just talk about how you get these things. I guess I should have done that. So what'll happen is you'll take all these markers here, and you'll put these 5 markers into a cup or something, right? And the same with these 5 markers, and the same with these 5 markers, but all in different cups, so right, they have to be in their separate cups. Then what will happen is at the start of each turn, like before the Germany turn, before Germany goes, then you would roll a dice. On a 7 to 12, then you draw a unit marker from the cup. And then you'll see what that is. Like, say you draw that first one that we were just talking about. Okay, you draw that one. It says, if the marker chosen belongs to a nation that is at war with another major power and the nation meets all other prerequisites, they may place the marker as indicated. Otherwise, put it back in the cup. So, It says place beneath any German fighter. So first of all, Germany would have to be at war, and also you'd have to have a fighter on the board. So that's what they're talking about, other conditions. Like some of them might say you can't place before a certain time or whatever, right? But this one just says if you're at war and you have a German fighter on the board, then place beneath it. And we're going to get, there's a couple of unique units, and you can see the next one is one of those. And that is a Messerschmitt. I can pronounce that one, but this one, 26, that's the next German one. It says, place beneath any German fighter. Replace that fighter with an ME-410 when it is January 1943 or later. So if you draw this marker from the cup before January of 1943, then you put it back in the cup and you don't get another roll. It's like, oh, well, I guess I didn't get that one. So, like I think there's what, 3 American planes, right? So you'll keep drawing those out of the cup the whole game until late in the game when America's finally at war, right? And so who those guys were? They were known as the Horst Wessel or Horst Wessel wing after the Nazi activist Horst Ludwig George Erich von Wessel. Originally, this unit was equipped with Bf-110s, but in 1943 it was re-equipped with the Me-410 heavy fighter. This unit fought in France, the Battle of Britain, the Mediterranean, and on the Eastern Front. They also have these, like for the new units, and that's one of them. Let's just take a look at this thing here. Okay, so this is the Messerschmitt that you replace that with. Now the cool thing about this one is that it is both a fighter and a tactical bomber. So when you're on your when you're doing your attack moves, like when you're moving your planes and your units into combat, you will state, okay, this plane this time is going to be a fighter, or this plane is going to be a bomber. Like you have to specify, and you can't switch it half the way through to say, okay, it's 4th round, now I'm going to switch to a fighter. You know, like they equipped it before it took off to do one or the other. So that's why you have to specify how it's equipped when you go into combat. And you'll notice here, like the normal fighters attack and defend at 6, right? Well, these attack and defend at 7. The movement is 5. If you were just to purchase one of these, it would cost 13. But in this, like they said here, you replace a fighter with this plane here in 1943 if you draw that thing from the cup. So obviously when you draw it, it has to be 1943, and you have to have a fighter on the board. You probably will for the Germans at that time. So if you decide it's going to be a tactical bomber when you take off, sorry, I forgot to mention that the 3 there is the interception value. So for bombing raids, you would use that 3, and that's the same with the fighter. So if you're going to use it as a tactical bomber, you would state that ahead of time. It would attack at an 8 and defend at a 5. So obviously on defense, you would always be, want to be a fighter. But so it's only on your attack move that you have to take off. So the defense value doesn't really matter, right? And the movement and the costs aren't going to change, so that's why they haven't listed those. But anyway, why you would decide to use this as a tactical bomber, obviously, is for where you get to choose the casualties, right? So like, what is it, 1 to 3 for a fighter? Or a tactical bomber. If you roll 1 to 3, you get to choose your casualty. Plus, it's got an 8 for an attack value. So that is why you would decide when you were taking off that you were going to use it as a tactical bomber. Anyway, so that is that one. That's the Messerschmitt. We'll go on to the next one in a second. Okay, I just looked at the card there. Sometimes when you're making videos, your brain gets filled with so much information that you have a brain fart. But anyway, what I was talking about there was the target selection. It's 1 to 3, and that's just for ground and naval units. Your target selection doesn't work against the air units, right? If you were going against a territory with that had fighters in it, or any kind of air power for that matter on defense, then you probably want to choose it as a fighter so that you could take the fighters in that first shot rather than using the 8 and the target selection for the ground units, right? So that's how you would decide. Okay, so the next one here, and this is a pretty nice one here. This is another, it's a 3D printed unit just like the last one, the Messerschmitt. So this is an Italian unit, and this is, let's just take a look at that. Special Aero Torpedoes unit. So it was the 278th Squadron, and it was formed in 1940 and equipped with an SM-79 Sparviero bomber. So that's what that is. The Italians eventually had over 100 of those in various squadrons, which were used mainly against British naval and merchant ships. So this guy specializes in naval battles, and that's good because Italy has the Mediterranean to deal with, so that's why they give you that one, right? So what happens is you place beneath any Italian tactical or medium bomber. If you draw that from the cup, if you have a tactical or medium bomber, then you would place the marker underneath that and replace it with that plane there, right? And then you increase its target selection to 1 to 4 if it's going naval. So if you're attacking boats, then it has a target selection of 1 to 4. So that's pretty great. Pretty great. You get to use that against, like target whatever you want, right? Target a cruiser instead of the guy being able to take a submarine off, or like if there's one hit left on a battleship, bam, there goes the British battleship to the bottom of the Mediterranean. So it's available right away in 1936, and also you would have to have either a medium bomber or a tactical bomber on the board, and you do start with a tactical bomber. So if you were to draw this one on the first turn, then you get this one on the first turn, right? And it says a setup change. If using this aircraft without the fighter squadron rules, replace any one Italian medium bomber with the SM-79 at the start of the game. So there you go. So let's take a look at the stats on that one. Because this is a new one, they give you the stats on it. So it attacks at 7, has an interception value of 1, and it defends at 4. It costs 12, and it moves 4. So it doesn't move like a medium bomber. If you wanted something with a lot of range, then you probably keep the medium bomber, right? This is a different kind of plane that has a different kind of quality to it, right? Like this is especially for killing naval units. Anyway, so that's the Italian one. This one here is not a new unit. That's something that you will recognize. So this is the Kamikaze Squadron. The Nakajima K-143 was one of the aircraft used extensively in a kamikaze role. Over the course of the war, Japan 2,800 kamikaze attacks were made, sinking 34 U.S. ships, damaging another 368 and killing 4,900 sailors. Only 14% of kamikaze attacks survived the anti-aircraft fire to score a hit, and only 8.5 of the vessels sank. So, they were just throwing planes and dudes at people and not getting much out of it. But when they did get a hit, like when you did sink a boat, I mean, that was a pretty big score, right? And it was a desperation move, right? That's when you're only getting near the homeland. So how would you use that one? Is you place that marker beneath any Japanese fighter in the home country or Okinawa. So if you drew that thing out of there, you would have to have a fighter on Japan or Okinawa. Here, let's just move over and take a look at that. Now, if all your fighters were on the mainland when you drew that out, if you didn't have one here or here, like any of these islands right here, then you would have to put that marker back in the cup because you didn't have a fighter out there to put your marker under. So be aware of that if you're playing with these rules, that you need to keep a fighter back there for that reason. So you remove this marker from the board to make an additional kamikaze attack. And there's all kinds of rules surrounding kamikazes. You get a certain number of kamikaze attacks and everything, and in certain places. So you will still have to follow those kamikaze rules. What this does, it gives you one extra kamikaze attack, basically, is what it does. And the fighter is not destroyed. So they're just they're saying, okay, you need a fighter to get this one, and once you get it, then when you expend the kamikaze, you only expend the token, you don't expend the fighter, okay? So that's the Japanese one, the kamikaze. And the last one you see there is yellow. You think, oh, yellow, what the hell? So what that is, it's the Spanish Blue Squadron. And they consisted of a number of volunteer Spanish pilots and ground crew that served with the Germans Luftwaffe. From 1941 to 1943, five separate Spanish Air Force squadrons took tours of duty in the East, flying fighters, bombers, and air transports. So that's why you get a yellow one, because the yellow in this game represents the Spanish nationalists, right? So what you would do is you would place this marker and a Spanish nationalist fighter. So you wouldn't just place that under an existing one. You actually get that Spanish fighter and you get the marker, and you would place it in Berlin. Placed only if the Spanish nationalists won the Spanish Civil War and the USSR and Germany are at war. So first of all, the yellow guys have to win the war over in Spain there, and Germany has to be at war with Russia. And if those conditions are met, then you get to place this yellow plane and under that yellow plane, that marker, in Berlin. And then the fighter may defend normally, but can only be used to attack the USSR. So you can only attack Russians with that. Like when the Spanish Civil War was going on, the nationalists were fighting the Republicans, and the Republicans were communists. And that's why these guys volunteered to go fight in Germany, because the Russians were supporting the Republicans in this war. So they didn't mind coming up to Germany there and fighting the communists in Russia, because that's really who they were fighting against, was the communists who were supporting the Republicans. So no pluses and minuses on that. It's just an extra fighter, and you can only use it to attack the Russians. But if it gets attacked, like say the Americans or the French or the British attack a territory where that fighter is, then of course you can defend with it. You just can't attack anybody other than the Russians. Okay, so that is the Axis squadrons. So we'll take a look at the Allies next. So looking at the Allied squadrons here, the first one here is a Spitfire, and you get the Spitfire and you get this one here. Now what that represents is the 92nd Fighter Squadron. They fought in the early stages of the war, providing air cover at Dunkirk and fighting in the Battle of Britain. The group then moved to the Mediterranean and fought in North Africa, Malta, and Italy. It scored a total of 317 air victories, the highest of any RAF squadron. I would say, well, short of that German 10,000 squadron. But still, they were the most successful British one. So what happens with those ones? You place beneath any British fighter in the British home country. This unit gains a +1 attack, defense, and interception value. So your interception value is normally 3. You would increase that to 4. Instead of attacking and defending at 6, you would attack and defend at 7 with that. And you would place it under any Spitfire or British fighter for that matter, in the home country. So if you didn't have a British fighter in the home country and you drew that marker, then you wouldn't get to place the marker. You would place it back in the cup. And the next one there, this one's interesting here. It's just your regular Mosquito there, but it was specially equipped. And what it was it's the number 100 group RAF. So the number 100 bomber support group of the Royal Air Force was formed to counter radar-equipped German night fighters with electric countermeasures. EW-equipped de Havilland Mosquito aircraft were used to disrupt enemy fighters' electronics or locate and destroy them. EW aircraft were successful in overcoming German air defenses and destroying 258 German aircraft. So how you would use that is replace any British tactical bomber with the Mosquito and place this marker underneath it. This unit reduces the interception value of all fighters that oppose it by 2. So that could be very powerful if you're into strategic bombing, because what you would do is you would, like you'd grab yourself a bomber or 2 or 3, and a few fighters, and then take this thing in on the bombing run, which you don't normally do. And then if they decide to intercept, and their fighters normally intercept at 3, well, now their fighters are going to intercept at 1 instead, because you're disrupting their radar, right? But your fighters are continuing to shoot at 3. So not only could you take money off of them, but you could also have a good chance of taking planes off them as well, because you're rolling at 3s and they're rolling at 1s. And so like that's pretty devastating if you use it properly, like if you use it for that reason. And if you're not using it for that reason, then you would just use it as a tactical bomber, you know, with all the stats and characteristics of a tactical bomber. It's just, you know, you could also use it in this capacity to go on the bombing runs with the fighters and bombers to disrupt the other guys. So that's pretty cool that you could do that. Okay, so the next one is the 4th fighter group. So that's this one here. And what that was it says, when the United States entered the war in 1941, the 4th Fighter Group was formed from U.S. pilots serving in the RAF. The 4th Fighter Group is credited with destroying the most enemy aircraft, both on the air and on ground, of any unit in the 8th Air Force. The 4th provided escort for U.S. bombers and air cover during the Normandy invasion. From 1944 on, the 4th flew P-51 Mustangs. So in 44 they switched to flying the Mustangs. So what you would do with that, you would place this marker beneath any U.S. fighter. This fighter gains +1 attack, defense, and interception value. And so that's this one here. So America would have to have a fighter. And that's it. It doesn't say that you have to be at war or anything. I thought that you would have to wait until a certain time. Oh yeah, you do have to be at war. Sorry, I was thinking something else. Never mind. So yeah, you would have to be at war with the Americans to get these, and all 3 of these fighters here, you would have to be at war to get them. So you're not going to get one of these until late in the war. So you better be hoping that you draw these 2 out of the cup first before you draw the other 3. Okay, so the next one there, and that's this one here. That is the 56th Fighter Group. It had the most air-to-air combat kills of any unit in the 8th Air Force. It was credited with 665 kills in the air, an additional 331 on the ground. The unit flew Republic P-47Ds on air superiority, bomber escort, and bombing missions in Germany. So how you would use that is place this marker beneath any U.S. fighter or tactical bomber on the board. Then you replace that bomber with a P-47D. So this is also a plane that does not come, that you don't already have. This is a new one here. It's a 3D printed one. So I'll give you a little bit of a closer look at that. Anyway, that's a P-47D. And let's take a look at the stats on that, because it's a new one. They give us stats on it. So here it is over here, the P-47D. So it's another one of those ones like the Messerschmitt where you can use it as a fighter or a tactical bomber. So regular attack and defense here it's showing. But let me just take a look at something here. So, but you would get... Sorry, no, that's not right. Yeah, so that was the last one that was plus or minus. So it's still 6 and 3, 6 and 3. So that's fights like a regular one. It costs 12 though. And the reason it costs 12 is because you can also use it as a tactical bomber. So it is, that is its special ability, is that you can strap bombs to it instead of using it as a fighter. And in which case, you would have to do that at the start of your combat movement. You'd have to say, I'm using this as a tactical bomber. And you would do that like if there was no air-to-air battle to be fought. Say you're going against ships or going against ground units, then your attack goes up 1, right? And then you also get target selection of 1 to 3 because you're using it as a tactical bomber. And it says here it has to be January 1941 when the marker is drawn. So But America's not going to be at war before that anyway. It's highly unlikely. Maybe 1 out of every 20 games you're going to be at war before 1941. Anyway, so that's the P-47D. You can use it as a fighter or a tactical bomber. If you're on defense, you would just have to say, yeah, I'm using this definitely for a fighter, because then you roll in at 6 instead of 5, right? So the next one there, I don't know if you remember a show on TV years ago. I remember it was called Black Sheep Squadron, and that's what that is there. They flew Corsairs, and this is the Black Sheep Squadron. So that was the VMF 214 group. The Black Sheep were a U.S. Marine Corps fighter squadron that fought in the Pacific Theater. The Black Sheep destroyed or damaged 203 Japanese aircraft and registered 97 air-to-air kills. They also sank troop ships and bombed munitions depots. They flew the F-4U Corsair from 1943 on. So how you would use that, you place that marker beneath any fighter on carrier in the Pacific Ocean or land zone that borders the Pacific Ocean, and it gains a +1 attack and defense. So it doesn't tell you here that you have to wait until, what they say there, 1943. It just, America has to be at war. So you get a +1 attack and defense for this one, and it has to fight in the Pacific. The other ones it doesn't specify. You can fight those wherever you want. This one has to be in the Pacific. All right, then we're going to move on to the Comintern next. Okay, so for the Comintern, or the Russians if you prefer, since most of them were Russian, there's hardly anything that isn't Russian when it comes to the Comintern. The first one you see here is actually a Russian fighter, right? And so what they were was the Normandy Niemen Fighter Squadron, and they flew Yak-3, or that is a Yak-3 plane there. So they were a French regiment that served on the Eastern Front with Soviet forces. This unit was one of only 2 Allied units to fight inside Russia. The unit was credited with 273 kills using 3 different versions of the Russian Yak. So they had the Yak-1, the Yak-9D, and the Yak-3. So anyway, how would you use them is place that marker in the place units box. So if you drew that marker, you put it in the place units box. And then the Soviets may buy a fighter for 7 IPP and place it on the board with this marker beneath it. So you put it in the place units box, and then that becomes a Russian marker. Instead of paying, what is it, $10 for a fighter, the Russians get to buy that blue fighter for only $7 if they would like. And then this is a Soviet Union unit right away. But it's removed from the game if the USSR is at war with the Allies. So if the USSR and the Allies, either one of them declares war on the other, then this unit comes off the board. And that's why it's cheaper, right? Now there's no plus or minus or anything. There's nothing special about the way it fights or anything. It's just, you get it for cheap. And then you use it until you go to war, if you ever do. Like the game I just played there, they never went to war with the Allies, and it's likely that you wouldn't anyway until very, very late in the game, if you do. And the reason you would is to go and try to grab some of your victory condition points, right? So anyway, that's the Normandy one. Okay, so the next one is okay, it's the 588th Night Bomber Regiment. They were also called the Night Witches. And this is another 3D printed unit. So let's take a look at this one. So it's a biplane, right? It's this one's might be the most interesting unit in the thing, in this set. It's completely different from any of the other fighters in this. So what it was, the 588th Night Bomber Regiment, they were also known as the 46th Taman Guards Night Bomber Regiment. They were all-women regiment flying PO2 biplanes. The outdated PO2 was mainly intended as a trainer and crop duster. The 588th flew over 800 missions, almost always at night, intended to harass German forces with airdrop bombs. The pilots glided the PO2 over the target, engines off, the sound of which German troops likened to witches' brooms. So they knew there were women up there, and they could hear it overhead, like probably just a faint sound, and sounded like a witch's broom going overhead, and they go, oh no. Because what they were doing, there were women up there, and they were hucking grenades at them, eh? And you couldn't see them because it was nighttime. So That's kind of an ingenious thing what the Russians were doing, right? I mean, it wasn't that powerful. Like they were just crappy little planes, so they couldn't fly very far or anything. But kind of a greasy little move that they were doing there. So what happens is you would place this PO2 with the Night Witch's marker beneath it in or adjacent to any Soviet city. So if you drew this marker out of the cup, then you get that marker and you get that for free. And you place it in or adjacent to a Soviet city. And it says they may carpet bomb with one dice at 2 and cannot be intercepted or shot down by AA. So there's no defense against it. But the problem is you only get to go 2 spaces. So basically the adjacent territory. You would go to the adjacent territory, roll a 2, and then you would go home again. trying to kill somebody. So let's take a look at this PO2 biplane. Here it is right here, the one on the bottom. So it attacks at 2. It's got an interception value of 1. So you could also use it in a bombing raid, right? I wouldn't imagine you would be taking it into a bombing raid because it only goes 2 spaces. But if it was sitting in a factory location and somebody was bombing your factory, you might send it up to do that, right? So it only attacks and defends at 2. So it also has a defense of 2, right? If somebody attacks the territory where it's sitting, then it gets to defend at 2. It only moves 2 and it only costs 5. So it's available right at the beginning of the war because it says available in 1929. Also, it says it must be the last aircraft chosen as a casualty. So you can't lose that one first. If you have any other aircraft in the fight, you have to lose that one first. Okay then, so the next one is the 4th Guards Bomber Aviation. And this is the only one that you could use as a medium bomber, I think, out of all of the fighter squadrons. They put it in the fighter squadrons because it could also be used as a tactical bomber or fighter. So let's see, the 4th Guards. Okay, so they were a regiment that was given the Elite Guards designation in June of 1941. They flew Tupolev Ant-40 SB bombers. So anyway, how you would use those, you place that marker in the place units box. So if you draw that marker, you put it on your place units box. The next time a Soviet tactical or medium bomber is on the winning side of a combat. So all of the other units are either, if you're attacking, they're all eliminated, or if you're defending, you cause the attacker to retreat. Then you place the marker beneath that unit. So you place it either underneath a tactical bomber or a medium bomber. And then that unit gains +1 attack and defense. So it's kind of like Soviet Guards, right? And that's what these are. These are Guards markers. So that's what you get, a Guards marker basically if you draw that out. And you win a battle, you place it underneath a bomber or tactical bomber. The next one is 28th Guards fighter. So what they were, they originally flew the MiG-3 fighters, but was later equipped with Lend-Lease P-39 era Cobra jets from the United States. The unit fought in the Liberation, Belarus, and East Prussia. So you place that marker in the place units box again. Next time a Soviet fighter or jet fighter is on the winning side of combat, then you get to put that marker underneath that fight, underneath a fighter or jet fighter that was in that fight. So if you win a battle and you got a fighter in there or a jet fighter, you place this marker beneath it, and then you gain +1 attack and defense. And the last one is exactly the same thing. It's the 470th Guards Fighter Aviation. They give you 2 different kinds of fighters just for some variation in the set, right? But they're the same thing basically. Like they're interchangeable. You could put this fighter here and this fighter here if you wanted to. So the 470th, they was designated a Guards unit in March of 1943. They flew the LA-5 and LA-7 fighters and were credited with 392 kills. So these guys are a lot different than the other guys, and I guess, you know, the Russians in this game are a lot different than the other guys, aren't they? So how you get the units are different though. You place these in the place units box. You don't do that with any of the other ones. you know, they have different kind of conditions to get those ones right. But I think like when we played with them, we played with all 15 of them. We didn't just draw from a cup and and decide to use them or see if we could use them or not. What we did was we just each guy got all 5 of his planes and we put them all on the board. Like the yellow one there said you had to place it in Berlin, so we had to place that one in Berlin. Like we tried to place it where it says to place it, if it said to place it in a specific location. This one here had to be placed in the Pacific, So we did that, and also we followed the rules, like the Normandy one here. It was going to be lost if war was declared between the Comintern and the Allies, which it wasn't. So it stayed, I think, till the end of the game. I don't think he was shot down. The kamikaze one, what we did was we just gave them an extra kamikaze token and the fighter. So then after that, the fighter just flew wherever he wanted, and we kept the kamikaze token in Japan, and just to signify that they've got an extra kamikaze role in the game, which they didn't use. Like they were good players, so they kept the Americans out of the war as long as possible. So I never did make it across the Pacific. I was playing the Allies. I never did make it across the Pacific with my ground units, and so they never had to use the kamikaze token because I didn't even get a sniff of Japan. Anyway, so that is the Elite Fighter Squadrons. You can play it the way we played it, or you can play it the way the rules specified it, and I've gone through the entire rule set here. There's the Elite Fighter Squadrons. It's pretty neat. I like that. I like when you get units like this, things that make them special when you get them in a set. So I really like this one. Anyway, that's it. Take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade out.